Imagine moving into your first place all alone, seeking peace after a tough breakup. That was me, back in 2021, a 27-year-old living in a quiet Illinois townhouse. I thought the solitude would be good for me, a chance to heal. My little place was part of a plain, clean row of houses, tucked away in a sleepy cul-de-sac. It was the kind of neighborhood where nothing ever happened, or so I thought. But almost immediately, one person stood out. He lived 3 doors down, a tall, heavy-set man in his mid-40s with a scruffy beard. What made him different? His strange habit of standing outside his house at night, just staring. Sometimes he'd pace, sometimes he'd smoke, but mostly, he just stood there, watching. I'd pull into my driveway late at night after work, and there he'd be, unmoving, his eyes fixed on the street, or worse, directly on me. He never waved, never smiled. Just stared. My friends and mom tried to reassure me, saying he was probably just a night owl. But there was something deeply unsettling about him. It wasn't just his presence, it was the chilling stillness. He never fidgeted, never checked his phone. He was like a statue, always watching, never participating. I told myself I was being paranoid, but that gnawing feeling in my gut grew stronger every night. Then, the noises started. It was mid-September. I'd just gotten home from a long shift, exhausted, and fell asleep around midnight. But at precisely 2:37 a.m., a sound ripped me awake, metal scraping against wood. It sounded like an old gate creaking open. My heart pounded. I listened, and then I heard them, soft, crunching footsteps, like someone walking slowly across the decorative rocks in my backyard. I knew instantly these weren't animal sounds. I grabbed my phone and a dull kitchen knife I kept for emergencies. It felt ridiculous at the time, but now. I crept to the window and peeked through the blinds. Nothing. The motion light wasn't on, which meant whoever was out there had either come in a different way or was expertly avoiding the sensor. Shaking, I dialed 911. The dispatcher was calm, but I could barely breathe. 10 minutes later, red and blue lights flickered through my front window. The officers checked around the back. The gate was closed, no signs of tampering. They told me it was probably just a raccoon, giving me a look that said, "You're wasting our time." I didn't argue. They left, and I didn't sleep another wink that night. The next morning, I went out to check myself. And that's when I saw it. A flat stone, about the size of a book, wedged under the back gate. It looked like it had been placed there deliberately, to stop the heavy spring from closing the gate all the way. It was subtle, like someone planned to come back without making a sound. I called the police again, but they said there wasn't much they could do. I felt like I was losing my mind. 2 nights later, it escalated. At exactly 2:14 a.m., I woke up again, this time to the unmistakable sound of my back door handle turning. It rattled gently at first, then a harder jiggle, as if someone was testing it, trying to get in. My heart hammered against my ribs. I couldn't see anything, but I felt someone on the other side. My mouth went bone dry. I called the police again. While I waited, hiding in the hallway, my motion light clicked on. Through a tiny gap in the blinds, I saw a shadow move across the window. It was a man. He didn't run. He just stood there, staring. The same 2 officers showed up. This time, they actually found footprints in the gravel, big ones, leading right up to my door. But still, no entry had been made, so they claimed there wasn't enough to go on. They promised to patrol more often and told me to keep my doors locked. The very next day, I installed security cameras. One above the back door, one above the front. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, lights off, glued to the live feed on my phone. 2:14 a.m. came and went. Nothing. Then, at 2:23 a.m., the back camera triggered. A man stepped into the frame. He walked in through the gate, like he knew exactly how to move to avoid the motion sensor until the last second. He was tall and broad, wearing a black hoodie with the hood up, jeans, and gloves. He walked right up to my back door, looked directly at the camera, and smiled. A slow, stretched-out grin. Then he backed away, still staring, and disappeared into the dark. I called the police again. They watched the clip and admitted it was unsettling. But because he didn't break in, didn't damage property, and didn't appear armed, they still said their hands were tied. They wouldn't even ask the guy down the street to check his doorbell cam. I begged them. It was no use. My job is pretty unique. I work for a company that preserves foreclosed homes. Basically, we secure them, clean them out, get them ready for winter. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Most of the time, it's quiet work. You spend a lot of time alone in houses that used to belong to people who are long gone. Sometimes it's sad, sometimes it's just boring. But every once in a while, you get a house that feels off. This happened in 2020. I was sent to clear out a property in a rural part of upstate New York. It was one of those dying towns, just a gas station and a few shuttered businesses. The house itself was a small, one-story place, hidden off a dirt road, surrounded by overgrown woods. No other homes in sight, just trees and silence. The file said the elderly owner had passed away, and no one claimed the estate. The power had been off for over a year. I pulled up on a Monday morning, ready to get to work. From the outside, the house looked fine, just covered in weeds. I had to shove the front door open, it was swollen shut. Inside, it was dusty, stale, and filled with old, faded furniture. Pretty standard. I pulled out my work phone to start taking photos to document everything. That's when it rang. It startled me because I had no signal out there. I checked. But the phone buzzed anyway. Unknown caller. I answered, and there was nothing but a low, crackling static. I said, "Hello," twice, then hung up, figuring it was a glitch. I got to work, starting with photos. The living room was cluttered, like a grandma's house, lace curtains, old paintings, porcelain figures. As I moved into the hallway, I noticed a smell. Not rot, more like mildew, dust, and something faintly metallic. No names I recognized, all local. I moved on. In the master bedroom, on the nightstand, was an old rotary phone. I stopped and stared. I hadn't seen one in years. It was off-white, yellowed with age, with a long coiled cord. The kind of phone that would never ring again because the line had been cut years ago. I headed to the bathroom, and that's when my phone rang again. Unknown caller. This time, I hesitated. I picked it up, stepped into the hallway, and answered. Still nothing at first. Then, after about 5 seconds, I heard a whisper. So soft I could barely make it out. It said, "Don't answer the phone in the bedroom." Then the line went dead. I stood there, frozen, heart pounding. The house was dead silent. I checked the windows, all closed. No one was outside. No signs of forced entry. My first thought was that it was a prank, maybe one of the other guys messing with me. But no one else knew I was there that early. And again, I had no signal. I checked my phone, 1 bar, then nothing. It flickered in and out. I tried calling my supervisor, but the call failed. I decided to finish the job as quickly as possible. I started boxing up items in the living room, books, figurines, dusty glassware. But the whole time, I felt off, like I was being watched. I kept glancing toward the hallway, half expecting to see someone standing there. Then the phone rang a third time. But it wasn't my phone. It was the old rotary phone in the bedroom. I heard it from across the house, a shrill, mechanical ring that echoed through the empty rooms. That phone should have been dead. The line was disconnected. No dial tone, no service. Yet, it rang like an old-fashioned bell that I walked slowly down the hallway. I backed out of the room. I wanted to leave, but part of my job was securing the property, and I still had to check the basement. I almost said, screw it, but something made me keep going. Maybe it was pride. Maybe I just didn't want to admit how scared I was. The basement door was in the kitchen. I opened it slowly. The stairs creaked as I stepped down, flashlight in hand. I smelled mold and something like rust. Shelves lined the walls, filled with old paint cans and broken furniture. In a back corner, there was a small table. On it, a cordless phone, a newer model, gray plastic, covered in dust. And next to it, a stack of yellowed notebooks. I picked one up and flipped through it. Each page had a name, a date, and a short sentence. Lena H., July 3, 2019. Rang once, didn't answer. Carl M., September 12, 2019. Picked up, warned him. Dozens of entries like this. I dropped the notebook. My heart felt like it completely fell out of my body. I looked around the basement, fearing I wasn't alone, that someone was watching me from the darkness. I rushed back up the stairs, looking behind me the whole time, my heart in my throat. I didn't finish the job. I drove straight back to the office and turned in my report. I didn't tell them everything. I just said the property was unsafe and possibly had squatters or interference. They reassigned the job to another crew. 2 days later, I got a text from one of the other guys, Mark. He'd gone out there that morning to finish the job. I hadn't told him specifically what happened. His message said, the phone in the bedroom with no service rang while I was in there. What the hell? I called his work cell immediately. He told me he didn't answer the phone in the house because he was too freaked out. The next day, Mark apparently quit without notice and never returned to work. I looked him up on Facebook. He's fine, but I never spoke to him again. I don't know what else he saw in that house, but it must have been bad enough for him to walk away from his job. My boss did call the police to report potential squatters after Mark quit, but they found nobody inside. Everything about that house, its isolation, its eerie interior, the calls to my cell, that voice on the line, and that damn house phone ringing, it was like I found myself in a legitimate horror movie. I swear it had to be one of two things, an elaborate, sick prank, or an equally elaborate trap. And I still don't know which is worse. In 2019, I was in my late 20s, living alone in a rental house. It was an older, one-story place with creaky floors, thin walls, and a small backyard, nothing fancy. But it was cheap, and it came with a basement, which I used for storage. I moved in that spring, and for the first few months, nothing strange happened. The house had its quirks, rattling pipes, a kitchen cabinet that swung open on its own, but nothing unusual for an old place. The only part one didn't like was the basement. The door was in the hallway, right next to the bathroom. It was heavy and stuck a little when you opened it. And the light switch for the basement. It was halfway down the stairs, meaning you had to walk down a few steps in total darkness before you could even turn on the light. The first time I went down there, I felt weird. Not scared, but definitely uneasy. The single bulb didn't do much to light the corners, and the whole place smelled like old wood. But I didn't need to be down there for long, so I stored my things, shut the door, and didn't think much of it. That changed around late October. I'm a night shift security guard, so I usually get home around 3 a.m. One night, I was heading to the bathroom before bed when I heard something. It sounded like a faint knock. 3 soft taps. It came from behind the basement door. I froze. At first, I thought I imagined it. Maybe the pipes, or the house settling. But as I stood there, holding my breath, I heard it again. 3 distinct knocks. I backed up a few steps and stared at the door. Silence. I remember whispering to myself, "It's just the house," even though I didn't really believe it. I didn't open the door. I went to my bedroom, locked the door, and stayed awake for 2 hours, just listening. Eventually, I fell asleep with the TV on. The next morning, everything was exactly as I'd left it. No signs of anyone. No footprints in the dust, no broken windows. I convinced myself it had to be the house shifting, or maybe a small animal had gotten in somehow. I moved on. But a few nights later, it happened again. This time, I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth when I heard the knock. Not 3 taps this time, just 1, but it was loud and close, like someone had used their knuckles hard against the basement door. I opened the bathroom door and looked. The basement door was closed. Nothing moved. The hallway was quiet. I walked over and put my ear against the wood. At first, nothing. Then, very faint, I heard what sounded like breathing. Slow, steady, as if someone was standing on the other side, waiting. I backed away and went to my room again, locking the door. I called my landlord. I told him something strange was going on, that I thought someone might have gotten into the house. He seemed skeptical but said he'd come by to check it out. When he arrived in the morning, we both went down into the basement together. He looked around, checked the windows, the walls, even the foundation. Nothing was damaged or broken. No signs of a break-in or animals. I didn't say anything. I couldn't explain what I was hearing, and I didn't want to sound crazy. For the next week, things were quiet. I started to think that maybe I was just overtired, imagining things. I was working too much, after all. But then one night, around 2 a.m., I was sitting on my couch watching TV when I heard the basement door creak. Not a knock or a slam, but a slow, grinding creak of hinges moving. I sat up straight and turned off the volume. I could hear it. I got up and peeked down the hallway. The basement door was I had to know what was going on. I stood at the top of the stairs and shined the light down. The basement was pitch black. The bulb wasn't on. It must have burned out. That's when I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. They weren't rushing. They were slow, but they were 100% footsteps. I backed away. My hands were shaking. I slammed the door shut and held the handle tight. For a moment, I felt the pressure of something on the other side, like it was leaning against the door. Then it stopped. I locked the door and called the police. I told them someone was in my basement. They showed up about 10 minutes later. 2 officers cleared the house and went down into the basement. I stood in the front yard waiting, and after what felt like forever, they came back up. They said they didn't find anyone. No signs of forced entry or anyone hiding. Nothing was even disturbed. One of them even tried to laugh it off, asking if I'd been watching scary movies. I knew what I heard. After they left, I didn't go back inside right away. I just stood there, staring at that house. Finally, I went back in, locked every door and window, and stayed up until the sun came up. That morning, I bought a padlock and installed it on the basement door. I didn't care if it was allowed. I needed it. For the next month, the basement stayed quiet. No sounds or knocks or anything. I almost let myself relax. Then one night, I got home from work and noticed the basement door was open. Not just unlocked. The padlock was lying on the floor, broken. The door itself was slightly ajar. I hadn't touched that door in weeks. I stood there, staring at it. And for the first time, I realized something. Every time this had happened, every noise and every knock, it had always happened at night when I was alone. I did not go down. I couldn't. I packed a bag, left the house, and stayed at a friend's place for a few days. When I came back, I literally nailed the basement door shut. I even wedged a chair against it. I didn't care if the landlord got mad. I just couldn't look at that door anymore. A few nights later, around 3 a.m., I was lying in bed when I heard a sound that I still can't explain. It was a voice. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even someone speaking clearly. Like the barely audible rumble of someone's vocal cords. It came from somewhere beneath the floorboards, directly under my bed. That was it. I called the police again. They showed up, did their search, and nothing turned up. So, I packed everything, minus the stuff in the basement, and I left. I didn't even wait for the lease to end. I don't know what was in that basement. I don't want to know. All I can say is that sometimes when I lie awake at night in my new apartment, I think about all this, and I wonder if I'd waited just a little longer, what would have come up those steps.